Investors hoped the Trump presidency would pump up the energy sector, but tariffs are a wild card. The US is the world's largest oil producer, and its S&P 500 energy sector has gained about 3% since the start of the year, a bit ahead of the wider market. But American refineries import heavy crude oil from Canada and Mexico, which could be hit by a 25% tariff President Trump has threatened to bring in on the 1st of March. Tyler Ellegard is a portfolio manager at Gradient Investments. Tyler, why do these tariffs matter to the energy sector?
Yeah, look, I would say part of it is a little bit of an unknown. So it's hard for us to really make any adjustments to our portfolio right now of making a call on which companies or which areas within energy is going to be heavily affected and not affected. But I would say the uncertainty is quite a challenge, right? We saw the reaction in the stocks and the various industries within the sector when the tariffs were announced, and then the rally back when the tariffs were put on pause for 30 days.
Tyler, the administration seems to hope that these mostly Canadian heavy crude imports can be replaced by domestic production. Would that actually be possible?
I would say that would be pretty challenging. And the reason for that is there's different types of crude oil. There's not just one, right? So the US mainly produces what's called sweet light crude, and that's referred to as WTI or West Texas Intermediate. But then there's also heavy sour crude, and there's some intermediates as well. But this heavy sour is what comes from Canada, and that's what we typically import, right? So the US produces, call it 13 million barrels a day. We export about 10 million barrels a day. So that's a majority of our production. And so we have to import that. And so we import about 6 million barrels, 6.5 million barrels a day. And 60% of that comes from Canada. Another 7% of that comes from Mexico. And our refineries, I would say about 70% of our refining capacity takes heavy sour crude oil.
So does that mean this is more worrying for some energy companies than others, depending on whether their profits coming mostly from US extraction or from refining?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it'll depend on a company by company basis, depending on how much heavy sour versus how much sweet light crude they refine. So a good example of this is Valero Energy. Only 20% of their throughput volumes is heavy sour, right? So there still is an operational impact for them if there is a 25% tariff on these Canadian and Mexican imports. But then if you look at a company like Marathon Petroleum, 43% of their refining throughput is heavy sour, right? So it's going to be a very, very different situation for company by company, but there is going to be a heavy cost associated with it.
Would you expect, though, that this increase in tariffs would feed into a rise in the price of WTI?
It very well could, right? If we're exporting, right? I said we produce 13 million barrels a day. We export 10 million. So all of a sudden, if that 10 million of demand of exports remains, but then we also need to start consuming 6 to 7 million barrels a day additionally, right? That's a lot of demand for something that is relatively limited, right? It takes time to get wells into the ground to start pumping oil. And so that's probably going to drive oil prices higher for the time being, even if companies do start to drill, right? That's Trump's slogan, right? Even if we get that, there still is going to be a lot of demand for a relatively limited supply of WTI.
So should investors be looking out for the wider impact on consumers, not just on the gas price at the pump, but the production costs of many things?
Oil, petroleum, it goes into everything. And so it's not just going to be an increased price at the pump. You have to think about the additional cost of oil going into other products. A good example that I always like to use is Legos, right? Legos use petroleum. So there could be an impact on the price of Legos, right? Consumers, kids, they love Legos. So there could be an impact there. And petroleum jelly, lipsticks, plastics, right? Everything uses oil at this point. So I think it could be a pretty big impact on a broader swath of consumers rather than just thinking about it at the pump.
You said, Tyler, that you wouldn't shrink your position in energy for now because of the uncertainty. But at what point should investors start getting worried, do you think?
Yeah, I think once you get a concrete answer from Trump and his administration on these tariffs are going in today or going on Tuesday, and we're not pushing them out anymore, right? That's once there's an actual concrete thing in place for us to start to quantify the potential impact, that's when you can start making a move. But if we're just going to start saying, okay, we're going to wait 30 days, and now we're going to, once we get to those 30 days, oh, let's negotiate again, and then let's push it down, right? As soon as they say these are in effect and in place, then you can actually make a move.
That was Tyler Ellegard of Gradient Investments. Don't forget, you can watch more videos on Reuters.com.